He told them no oxygen while she wrote help, mistake, or was he controlling it?
Let her wait. My dad said it like he was choosing coffee, not deciding if I got to breathe. I was on an ER bed, fingers clawing at the sheets, chest locking up while a nurse hovered and a doctor hesitated at the foot of the bed. I tried, but the air wouldn't come in right. And my dad, he nodded, calm, certain. She does this, he told them. It passes. No oxygen, no rush, just eyes shifting back to him like he was the one in danger. Then something clicked. A screen in the corner flickered on, casting a cold glow across the room. A voice calm, official cut through everything. This room is being recorded for review. Everyone froze. And for the first time, my dad looked at the camera. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It wasn't a glance, it was a calculation. His eyes locked on that tiny black dome in the ceiling corner like he was trying to remember something he should have noticed the second we walked in. His jaw tightened just for a second before his expression flattened again, controlled, measured, like nothing had changed. But everything had. The nurse who'd been hovering near the counter stopped mid-reach, her hand hovering over a sealed oxygen mask. The plastic crinkled softly as her fingers froze around it. She looked at the doctor. The doctor didn't move. Dr. Heller stood at the foot of my bed, one hand resting on the metal rail, the other holding my chart like it weighed nothing. He'd barely looked at me since he walked in. Not really. Just quick, surface-level checks, like I was a checklist, not a person. Vitals? He asked, without urgency. They're not fully taken yet, the nurse admitted quietly. Not fully taken. I sucked in another breath that didn't go deep enough, my chest tightening harder, like something invisible was wrapping around my ribs and pulling. My fingers slipped against the sheet, damp with sweat. Not fully taken. I turned my head toward my dad. He hadn't moved closer. He hadn't touched me. He stood just outside the reach of the bed, arms relaxed at his sides, posture steady, observing. Waiting. She gets like this, he repeated, a little firmer this time, like the first explanation hadn't landed the way he wanted. If you rush in, you make it worse. The nurse hesitated, but her file says. I know what her file says, he cut in, not raising his voice but sharp enough that she stopped talking. I'm her father. That word landed heavier than anything else in the room. Father. Authority. Final say. I tried to shake my head, but even that felt like too much effort. My lungs burned, every inhale shallow and incomplete, like trying to breathe through a straw that kept collapsing. I forced out, barely audible. No one answered me. The doctor flipped a page on the chart. Slow. Unbothered. She's stable enough to observe, he said. We don't want to overtreat. Overtreat. The word echoed in my head, distorted. Because I couldn't even get enough air to argue. I looked back toward the corner of the room, the screen still glowing faintly now, the message lingering there for a second longer before fading to a blank standby display. Recorded for review. My eyes moved from the screen back to my dad. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was watching them. Watching how they reacted, watching how they moved, like he was measuring something. That was when it hit me, sharp, sudden, and colder than the air in the room. He wasn't unsure. He wasn't confused. He was making sure they didn't act. My stomach twisted, even as my chest fought for air. This wasn't hesitation. This was control. The nurse shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable now. Her gaze flicked between me, the doctor, and my dad, like she was waiting for permission that wasn't coming. Her oxygen saturation, shouldn't we at least... She started again. Dr. Heller didn't even look up this time. We'll monitor. Monitor. Another word that sounded harmless until you realized it meant doing nothing. My hand slid off the edge of the bed, searching blindly until my fingers brushed against something hard. The clipboard. I dragged it closer with what little strength I had left, the plastic edge scraping faintly against the metal rail. The pen was clipped to the top, just within reach. No one stopped me. No one helped me. They were too busy deciding if I was worth acting on. I fumbled with the pen, my grip clumsy, fingers trembling so hard the tip slipped twice before I could press it down. The paper blurred in front of me, my vision tunneling at the edges. I forced my hand to move. Slow, uneven, barely legible. The pen slipped. I clenched harder, dragging it again. Help. The letters scratched across the page, jagged and desperate. A shadow fell over me. The nurse. She leaned in, just enough to see what I'd written. Her eyes moved across the words, then flicked to my face. Something changed. Not panic. Not yet. But doubt. Real, visible doubt. She's asking for help, the nurse said, her voice quieter now but different, less unsure. My dad stepped forward slightly, just enough to re-enter her line of focus. She writes that every time, he said smoothly. It's part of the episode. Every time. Like this was routine. Like this me barely able to breathe was normal. The nurse didn't respond immediately. Her eyes moved back to the paper. Then to my chest, watching the way it struggled to rise, watching how fast I was breathing. Too fast. Too shallow. Wrong. You said it passes, she said slowly. It does. How long? A beat. Varies. That was the first crack. Small. Almost nothing. But I saw it. So did she. And for a second, just 1 second, the room felt like it tilted. Because now it wasn't just me feeling it. Someone else was starting to see it too. The nurse straightened slightly, her hand tightening around the oxygen mask she'd been holding earlier. Dr. Heller finally looked up. What is it? He asked, a hint of impatience creeping in. The nurse hesitated. And in that hesitation, everything balanced on a knife's edge. My dad shifted again, subtle, controlled, but this time I noticed exactly what he was doing. He stepped just enough to place himself between her and me. Not blocking completely. Just enough. Guiding the moment, steering it. My pulse spiked, a sharp, frantic rhythm against the suffocating pressure in my chest. He was managing this. Every second of it. Then, from somewhere just outside the room, a voice. Clear. Firm. Why isn't this patient on oxygen? The curtain twitched. The door handle turned. And my dad's expression, just for a fraction of a second, slipped. Why isn't this patient on oxygen? The question didn't just enter the room, it cut through it. The curtain snapped open halfway, and a second nurse stepped in, already gloved, already moving with purpose. She didn't wait for an answer right away. Her eyes went straight to me, my chest, my breathing, the way my fingers were curled tight against the sheet like I was holding on to something that wasn't there. Then she looked at the monitor. Still off? Her expression changed instantly. What's her saturation? She asked. Silence. The first nurse glanced at the machine, then at Dr. Heller. We haven't. You haven't connected her? The second nurse interrupted, sharper now. Dr. Heller straightened slightly, like the shift in tone finally reached him. We're observing before intervention. Observing what? She shot back. She can't breathe. I said she has episodes like this. My dad's voice came in smooth, controlled, right on cue. Both nurses turned to him. She spikes, panics, writes things down, makes it look worse than it is, he continued. If you jump in too fast, you reinforce it. Reinforce it. The words landed wrong. Too practiced, too clean. The second nurse didn't look convinced. She's cyanotic, she said, pointing my lips, my fingertips. That's not anxiety. I tried to speak again, but it came out as a broken inhale, sharp and useless. My throat felt tight, like it was closing in on itself. She's fine, my dad replied, firmer now. You're overreacting. The room went still again, but not the same kind of still as before. This one had tension in it. Visible. Building. The first nurse shifted beside me, her hand hovering near the oxygen port again. I could see it, the hesitation, the calculation. She knew what she was seeing. She just wasn't sure if she was allowed to act on it. Allowed. That word pressed harder than the lack of air. Dr. Heller exhaled slowly like he was trying to regain control of the situation. We follow a measured approach, he said. No need to escalate prematurely. The second nurse turned to him fully now. Her chart says immediate oxygen during respiratory distress. I'm aware of her chart. Then why aren't we following it? A pause. Not long, but long enough. My dad stepped forward again, just slightly, because her chart doesn't always reflect what actually happens at home. There it was again. That quiet override. That subtle shift where his word weighed more than anything written down. I felt it settle over the room like a decision being made without saying it out loud. I forced my hand to move again, dragging the clipboard back toward me. The pen scratched weakly as I added one more word beneath the first. Please. The letters slanted, uneven, desperate. The second nurse saw it. Her jaw tightened. She's asking you directly, she said, not looking at my dad this time, looking at the doctor. Dr. Heller didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked at me. Really looked this time. At my breathing. At the way my chest stuttered with each attempt. At the paper in my hand. Something shifted, but not enough. We don't base treatment on written panic responses, he said. Panic. That word hit harder than anything else. Because it erased everything I was feeling. Turned it into something optional. Something dismissible. My dad gave a small nod, approval, agreement, control, reaffirmed. And just like that, the balance tipped back in his favor. The second nurse took a step closer to the bed. Her airway. She is not an airway collapse. Dr. Heller cut in. How do you know? You haven't assessed. I've assessed enough. The edge in his voice shut the space down again. Authority. Final. The second nurse didn't back off, but she didn't move forward either. Not yet. I felt my vision narrow further, the edges darkening, the room pulling away like I was sinking beneath it. The sounds stretched, distorted, too far, too slow. I turned my head again toward the corner. The screen was dark now, but I knew it had been on. It had seen everything. My eyes flicked back to my dad. He wasn't watching me anymore. He was watching them again, waiting, measuring, like he was still deciding how far this could go. And that was when I realized something worse than not being believed. He wasn't afraid this was a mistake. He was afraid of losing control of it. The second nurse suddenly reached for the oxygen line. Fast, decisive. I'm putting her on, she said. No, my dad said immediately. Not loud, but absolute. Her hand stopped midair, and every eye in the room shifted again. Not to me, but to him. And in that moment, it was clear they were still waiting for his permission. My grip tightened around the clipboard, the paper crinkling under my fingers as the pressure in my chest spiked into something sharp and blinding. Because if they listened to him again, I didn't know how much longer I had. Then the second nurse did something different. She didn't look at my dad. She looked at the door and raised her voice. Can I get a supervisor in here? A beat. Footsteps faint, approaching from the hall. My dad's head turned slightly toward the sound. And for the first time since we got there, he didn't look completely certain. The footsteps got closer. Not rushed, not panicked, steady. The kind that made everyone in the room straighten without meaning to. My dad turned fully toward the doorway, and I saw it again, that tiny pause before he rebuilt his face. Calm, reasonable, concerned. Like he was about to explain a misunderstanding. Not the fact that I was still fighting for air while no one touched the oxygen sitting 3 feet away. A woman in dark blue scrubs stepped in, badge clipped high, expression already alert, house supervisor, mid-40s, hair pulled back tight, no wasted movement. She took in the room in one sweep. Me on the bed, the inactive monitor, the untouched oxygen, the doctor at the foot of the bed, my father standing too close to the decision. What's going on? She asked. Before either nurse could answer, my dad did. My daughter has stress-induced episodes, he said smoothly. They look dramatic, but intervention too early makes them worse. I was explaining that. The supervisor didn't respond right away. Her eyes stayed on me. How old are you? She asked. Sev, I started, but the word broke apart in my throat. 17, my dad answered for me. That made her glance snap to him. I asked her. The room went quiet again. It was a small thing, tiny even, but it shifted something. For the first time, someone in that room had pushed back on him without raising their voice. The first nurse stepped in carefully. Her chart notes rapid response oxygen protocol during respiratory distress. The supervisor held out her hand. Chart. Dr. Heller passed it over, slower than he should have. She scanned the page, then looked back at me. I could see her eyes tracking my breathing, counting the speed, the strain. Her mouth tightened. Why hasn't this been started? She asked. Dr. Heller answered this time. Parent reported repeated psychosomatic presentations we were observing before escalating. Psychosomatic. Another word to explain me away. The supervisor looked at my dad. And you told staff not to intervene? I told them not to overreact, he said. There's a difference. He sounded almost offended, like he was the one being cornered. My fingers twitched against the clipboard. I dragged it up again, the paper already bent from how tightly I'd been holding it. I didn't have the strength to write a sentence this time. Just one word. No. The letters were crooked and pressed so hard the pen nearly tore through the page. The supervisor saw it. So did the second nurse. My dad's eyes dropped to the paper too, but only for a second. Then he smiled, and somehow that was worse than if he'd gotten angry. She does that when people challenge her, he said. She's learned it gets attention. I stared at him. Not because I was shocked anymore. Because I wasn't. That was the part that made my stomach drop harder than anything else. He knew exactly how to say it, exactly how to make me sound unreliable, difficult, emotional. He wasn't improvising. He'd done this before, maybe not in a room like this, maybe not with cameras in the ceiling, but enough that the words came out polished. The supervisor took one more step toward my bed. My dad shifted too. It was subtle, but I caught it. He moved just enough to stay between her and me, not physically blocking her, just placing himself in the flow of the room again, controlling access, controlling pace. And then I noticed something that made the chill crawl up my arms. He glanced at the dark screen in the corner. Not randomly. Checking it. Like he was still thinking about the recording. Like he hadn't forgotten for a second that this room had heard him. The supervisor followed his line of sight for just a fraction of a second, then looked back at Dr. Heller. Has this room feed been flagged? She asked. The doctor blinked. No. Should it be? No one answered. My dad folded his arms. This is getting unnecessary. The second nurse let out a short breath through her nose, like she'd been holding back for too long. With respect, sir, she's deteriorating. I know my daughter. That landed heavy. Because in a normal room, that would have sounded protective. In this room, it sounded like ownership. The supervisor looked at me again, then down at the clipboard in my hands, then back to my dad. Does she have a history of refusing treatment? She asked. No, the first nurse said before anyone else could speak. Her chart says the opposite. It says delayed treatment increases risk. The words changed the air. Not dramatically. Just enough. Because now there was a contradiction sitting in the middle of the room, impossible to ignore. My dad's voice stayed controlled, but it got flatter. Her chart is outdated. It was updated 2 months ago, the nurse replied. Another crack? Another beat too long. The supervisor turned to Dr. Heller. Connect the monitor. Now. He didn't move. It was only a second. But everyone felt it. Then he said, let's not create panic. That was when the supervisor's expression changed. Not to fear, to decision. She looked past all of us, toward the open doorway, and raised her voice clear enough to carry into the hall. I need admin review on this room immediately. My dad took one fast step forward. That won't be necessary. Necessary? The word barely left his mouth before a voice from outside answered back. Actually, it is. The room went still. A man I hadn't seen before appeared in the doorway, security badge clipped at his waist, hospital administrator just behind him. The administrator looked straight at the corner screen, then at me gasping on the bed, then at the untouched equipment. And his face hardened. Stop everything, he said. Pull that recording, now. Pull that recording, now. Everything changed on that sentence. The room didn't just go quiet, it shifted. Authority moved. What had been my dad's space, his pace, his control, snapped out from under him in an instant. The administrator stepped fully inside, followed by security. Not aggressive, not chaotic, just present enough to make it clear this wasn't optional anymore. Start oxygen, the supervisor said immediately. This time, no one hesitated. The second nurse moved fast, connecting the line, securing the mask over my face. Cool air rushed in sharp, clean, real. My lungs stuttered, then pulled deeper than they had in minutes. It hurt, but it worked. I gripped the edge of the bed as my chest fought to catch up, each breath still uneven but no longer empty. Sound rushed back into the room, fabric shifting, quiet instructions, the faint hum of machines finally powering on. The monitor beeped alive beside me. Numbers started appearing. Too low? Way too low. She's hypoxic, the nurse said, not quietly this time. The word landed in the open, undeniable. Dr. Heller's posture stiffened. He glanced at the screen, then away, like looking at it too long would make it worse. My dad didn't look at the monitor at all. He was watching the administrator. "This is excessive," he said, voice controlled but tighter now. "You're escalating without cause." The administrator didn't even acknowledge him at first. He was focused on the supervisor. Timeline? "Patient arrived approximately 12 minutes ago," she said. "No oxygen administered, no vitals fully recorded." 12 minutes. It sounded longer out loud. It felt longer in my chest. "Why?" the administrator asked. A pause. Then Dr. Heller answered carefully. "We were informed by the parent that the patient has recurrent, non-critical episodes." "I told you what happens," my dad cut in, sharper now. "You're twisting this." The administrator finally turned to him. "No," he said evenly. "We're documenting it." That word hit harder than anything else so far. Documenting? Because it meant this wasn't staying in this room. My dad's jaw tightened. "You're overstepping." "And you may have interfered with medical care," the supervisor replied, just as steady. The air shifted again. That was new. Not suggestion. Not hesitation. A statement. My breathing steadied another notch, oxygen filling the spaces that had been empty before. My head felt clearer, just enough to follow everything now. To see it. Really see it. The administrator gestured toward the corner. "Is the recording active?" "It triggered when the delay threshold was hit," the supervisor said. Delay threshold. So it hadn't just been recording randomly. It had been watching for this. My dad's eyes flicked to the camera again, faster this time, less controlled. For the first time since we got here, he looked like he was catching up instead of leading. Security shifted slightly closer to him, not touching, just there. A boundary. Dr. Heller cleared his throat. "We need to focus on stabilizing the patient." "We are," the supervisor said, "and we're also addressing why she wasn't stabilized sooner." No one argued with that. The second nurse adjusted the mask gently against my face. "Stay with me," she said, her voice lower now, focused on me instead of the room. I nodded faintly, my grip loosening on the clipboard, still trapped against my side. The administrator stepped toward the bed, just enough to see the paper in my hand. His eyes scanned the uneven words. "I need help." "Please." "No." He looked up slowly. "Did anyone read this when she wrote it?" he asked. Silence. That silence answered everything. My dad exhaled sharply. "She writes things like that to manipulate." "Stop," the administrator said. Not loud, but final. And my dad stopped. Just like that. The supervisor turned to Dr. Heller. "Did you receive direction from the parent to delay care?" The question hung there, heavier than anything before it. Because now it wasn't about interpretation. It was about responsibility. Dr. Heller hesitated, and that hesitation was enough. The first nurse spoke, her voice steady now. "He told us she exaggerates. That intervening makes it worse." He nodded when we paused. Every word landed. Clear, specific, recorded. My dad's head snapped toward her. "That's not what I said." "We'll confirm," the administrator replied. He gestured toward the door. Outside, someone was already moving fast, purposeful, because now there was something to pull. Something to replay. Something that didn't rely on memory or interpretation. The truth was, sitting in a system somewhere, waiting. My dad looked around the room at the staff, the equipment, the monitor now steadily beeping beside me. At me. For the first time, he didn't step forward. Didn't interrupt. Didn't correct. He just stood there. And I saw it. Not panic. Not yet. But the loss of control? The supervisor turned back to the administrator. "Recording should be ready within minutes." Minutes. After everything that had just happened, it still wasn't over. Because whatever was on that recording was about to decide everything. The administrator nodded once. "Then we wait." They didn't make us wait in silence. They made us wait in procedure. The room shifted into something colder, more structured. The urgency of my breathing was still there, but now it existed alongside quiet voices, clipped instructions, and the constant, steady beep of the monitor confirming what should have been obvious from the start. Oxygen filled my lungs more evenly now. Not perfect, but enough that the panic wasn't swallowing everything else, enough that I could think and watch. My dad hadn't moved much. He stood near the foot of the bed now, not quite in control of the space anymore, but not removed from it either. His arms were crossed tighter than before. His posture still straight, but it looked held together now, not natural. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked toward the door. Waiting. Not for help, for something else. The administrator stepped back inside first. No rush this time, no raised voice. Just certainty. Behind him, another staff member carried a tablet screen already active. "That's the room feed," the supervisor said quietly. The air tightened again. Not chaotic. Focused. The tablet was placed on the counter, angled so the administrator, the supervisor, and doctor Heller could see it clearly. My dad took a step forward. Security stepped with him. Not touching. "Just enough. Let's keep space," one of them said calmly. My dad stopped. That was the first time I'd ever seen someone else set a boundary he didn't immediately push through. The administrator tapped the screen. The footage started. No sound at first, just video. The angle was high, fixed in the corner. It showed everything. Me on the bed. The nurse by the counter. My dad standing exactly where he had been. Dr. Heller entering. It looked smaller from up there. Simpler, like something that should have been handled in seconds. Then the audio kicked in. Let her wait. The room didn't react all at once. It happened in pieces. The second nurse went still. The first nurse's shoulders dropped slightly, like something she'd been holding finally had weight. Dr. Heller didn't move at all. And my dad watched it. He didn't interrupt. Didn't argue. Didn't correct. He just watched himself. She does this, it passes. Clear, unrushed, certain. The administrator's face didn't change, but his eyes stayed locked on the screen. The video continued. The hesitation, the lack of oxygen, the clipboard in my shaking hand. "I need help. Please." No. Every second stretched longer on replay than it had in real time. Because now there was no confusion. No pressure. No influence. Just what actually happened. The moment the second nurse reached for the oxygen, "No." My dad's voice. Flat. Immediate. The video paused. The administrator tapped the screen once. That single frame, his hand slightly raised, her hand stopped mid-motion, hung there. "Resume," the supervisor said quietly. The footage played again. The escalation, the call for a supervisor, the questions, the contradictions. The moment the administrator entered, "Stop everything, pull that recording, now." And then, the oxygen finally going on, the monitor lighting up, the numbers dropping into view. Hypoxic. The administrator paused it again. This time, no one spoke right away. Because there wasn't anything left to interpret. It was all there. Clear. Complete. Undeniable. My dad exhaled slowly. "You're taking that out of context." It sounded weaker now. Not wrong, just smaller. The administrator turned to him fully. "What context explains delaying oxygen to a hypoxic patient?" he asked. No raised voice. No anger. Just a question with nowhere to go. My dad opened his mouth, then stopped. For the first time, he didn't have an immediate answer. Dr. Heller shifted uncomfortably. "We were relying on the parents' report of..." "You're the physician," the supervisor cut in, "not the observer." That landed hard. Because now it wasn't just about my dad. It was about everyone who had followed him. The administrator nodded slightly. "We'll be filing a full incident report. This footage is being preserved." Preserved. Not deleted. Not dismissed. Saved. My dad shook his head once. "This is being blown out of proportion." "No," the administrator said. "This is being documented accurately." Security stepped a fraction closer. Still calm. Still controlled. But final. "We're going to need you to step out of the room," one of them said. A beat. My dad didn't move. Then he looked at me. Really looked this time. Not as a situation. Not as something to manage. Just looked. There was something there, something unreadable, something that didn't match the control he'd been holding onto this entire time. "You're okay," he said. It sounded automatic, like a script he'd used before. I didn't answer. I just held the oxygen mask in place and stared back at him, because now I knew he had seen exactly how not okay I was, and he had chosen this anyway. Security didn't repeat themselves. They didn't need to. After another second, my dad turned and walked out. No argument. No raised voice. Just gone. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and the room felt different immediately. Lighter, not safe yet, but closer. The supervisor stepped toward me, her voice gentler now. "You did the right thing," she said, nodding slightly toward the clipboard still in my hand. I looked down at it. The words were messy, pressed too hard, barely straight. But they had been enough. "I tried to tell them," I said quietly. "I know," she replied. And this time, someone believed me. The next few hours moved fast. Not chaotic. Precise. More tests, proper monitoring, a respiratory specialist consulted. Everything that should have happened the moment I walked in. Only now, it actually did. By the time my breathing stabilized fully, the situation outside the room had already moved forward. I didn't see it happen. But I heard enough. Security involvement. Formal statements. Administration contacting legal. My dad wasn't coming back into that room. Not that night. Maybe not after. A social worker came in before I was discharged. Calm voice. Direct questions. No assumptions. Just facts. Where would I go? Who else could take me? What I wanted. That last one felt unfamiliar. What I wanted. I answered carefully. But honestly, a few days later, I walked out of the hospital. Not with my dad. With a temporary guardian arranged through extended family. The air outside felt different. Not easier. Just clearer. Like something that had been pressing down for a long time had finally shifted enough for me to stand under it without collapsing. I had a folder in my hands. Discharge papers. Follow-up instructions. And a copy of the incident report summary. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew what it said. I'd lived it. I paused just before stepping off the curb, glancing back at the hospital doors. At the building. At the place where everything almost stayed the same. And didn't. The room recorded everything. Every word. Every delay. Every decision. It didn't change what happened. But it made sure it couldn't be ignored. And this time, that was enough.
If the camera hadn't been on, would anyone have believed her? Or would this repeat?